Hey, I'm Nick. Welcome to the Family Ministry Podcast. It's episode 285, and we're talking with Larry Cramer, children's pastor at CCV in Phoenix, Christ Church of the Valley, but most commonly known as CCV. They're a multi-site church, and we're looking at their kids ministry and some of the innovative things we're doing there. It's been a while, but a few months back, we were there with our Ministry Boost team and our coaching groups from earlier this year to do an in-person coaching gathering. And what we do at those gatherings is we'll typically visit 3, 4, maybe even 5 churches and just learn from them. And so CCV was one of the ones we visited. I took a lot of pictures, and a lot of the things that I saw there were innovative and fun. And I thought we got to share that on the podcast. So Larry came on and we talked about that. We even have, if you're watching this on YouTube, which is new, there's now a video version of this podcast on YouTube. If you watch this episode on YouTube, you'll get to see some pictures of the environments there at CCV as we talk about it. So maybe if you're a regular audio listener, which is probably all of you since the video version just came out last week, you might want to hit pause on this, go pick it up on YouTube, especially to watch that part of it so you can see those pictures of their environment there at CCV. But if you love listening to audio, you're going to be set because it's not going to go away from there either. You can get all the links and notes from this episode at nickblevins.com/episode 285 or in the description below on YouTube. If you're like me, you're asking new questions about what it means to lead your ministry. Like, what do we measure beyond attendance? How do we know if we're leading our ministries well? And are we handing the next generation a lasting, authentic kind of faith? I think these are the questions that we're all asking because it seems like everyone isn't coming back to our buildings like they used to. And even if they are, it still doesn't guarantee we're handing them a brighter future and a brighter faith. Plus, we want to reach new people who haven't connected with a church yet. I know our church does. So what if we could reframe what success looks like for the next year? Well, the Orange Tour is a day of live ministry training for you and your entire team. You'll learn what's new in culture, what's next developmentally for kids and teenagers in your church, and you'll show your team what it looks like to keep faith alive. My team will be in the Lancaster, Pennsylvania tour stop, so if you're there, make sure you find us and say hi. But wherever you are, Orange Tour is coming to a city near you. So bring your staff, your volunteers, parents, any leader who cares about the faith and future of the next generation to a one-day event guaranteed to spark ideas, collaboration, and innovation in your approach to ministry. It's a one-day event packed with practical training, and it only comes around once a year. So to find a location near you, to go to orangetour.org, but when you register, use the code MinistryBoost to save 10% at checkout. And if you're in Lancaster, make sure you say hi, but go to orangetour.org and use the code MinistryBoost to save 10%. Before we jump in and talk with Larry, I want to remind you about Clearstream for text messaging in your church. If you're not using texting in your church, you're missing out. I mean, it's a huge part of a church's communication strategy for all different kinds of reasons, but you need the right solution. Like we've had, I think maybe three different text message solutions over my time at my church, and Clearstream has been the best by far. We moved to that a couple of years ago, and it's been great. You know, we can send mass text messages to as many people as we need to. You can individually text with people as they reply. In fact, coming up here this weekend, I'll be leading a volunteer tour where we communicate with them via text to remind them of it. We communicate with them afterwards to help them take steps into serving roles. And we could even invite through text. So, you know, we might mass email a ton of people to invite them to a volunteer tour. But then as it gets closer, send a text message because we all know 98% of texts are read, whereas, 30% maybe of emails are opened and read. So you want a text message solution for your church. Clearstream is a great one. Check them out at nickblevins.com/text. And then if you haven't checked out volunteerplaybook.com for my new book, some of you have gotten it, you've read it, you've left reviews. I'm so thankful for that. That means a lot to me. It helps a lot to spread the news about the book. But I wrote the book to help church leaders create the kind of volunteer culture and volunteer team that we all desire, that we all dream of. You know, not the one that's 70% full or 50% full. And I always say I don't think 100% full is that realistic, but 90-some percent, full in your volunteer team is a possibility. You can have that. And beyond that, you can also create this healthy volunteer culture and team that you want. So that's why I wrote the book. You can get it at Amazon. If you go to volunteerplaybook.com, you'll see some other free resources if you want to check that out that come with it. If you do buy the print copy or the Kindle version, you can get an audio version free. So if you prefer audio, which I listen to most of my books now, it is on Audible. You can get it that way. But if you want to kind of get a 2-for-1, get the print or Kindle version, open it up, and you'll see a link where you can get the audio version for free. All right, enough of that. let's jump into my conversation with Larry Cramer about the innovative things they're doing at CCV in children's ministry. Welcome to another episode of the podcast. We got Larry Cramer on. Larry, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, and your church, which we're going to talk all about because I got to visit there recently. So I got lots of questions for the audience.
Yeah, for sure. Well, my name's Larry Cramer. So what I do here is I'm the lead kids pastor. I oversee our kids ministry at Christ Church of the Valley, and really just looking into the strategy, looking into policy procedures, and just content that we're going to produce here at CCV, and just kind of working with our kids pastors on each campus to kind of set the direction and see where we're going to go in the future with kids. But a little bit about myself is I'm married. I've got two girls. I've been married for, going to be 21 years. And my girls are 17 and 15. So I'm living definitely a great time with them right now in a TikTok world, doing dances with them and just having fun. And I actually had them go in my closet the other day and I said, okay, here, girls. You need to walk in here and you need to take clothes away that I should no longer be wearing. And so it's been fun. It's been a fun
Your
time.
whole wardrobe go by?
Because
that could
things. They start flipping
that could go both ways. Because on one hand, they could take it away because like, hey, this is not in style. But on the other hand, it could be like, this is in style, but for like people their age and they don't want you wearing it. So you know what I mean? Like you could lose on both fronts there.
You can really, because as you know, stuff starts to come back around. So things that I have
That's
like
true.
10 years ago, it's right back.
Yeah. You're like, hold on. Let me dig deeper in the closet. I've got some flannel and some ripped jeans. And I don't know. I'm not sure. Yeah. Don't ever come to me for style information, by the way. So that's awesome.
I did learn that the no-show socks are now no longer in style. So
interesting. I never liked those, so I can get behind that. I just never liked how they felt. Which that's why I have no style, because I care a lot more about how it feels than how it looks. But anyway, that's for another podcast. Well, tell us about CCV. You and I were talking about how there's like CCV in some ways is like this unknown church, but yet it's absolutely huge. I mean, you got to be one of the top 5 largest churches in the country. So it's kind of like this best kept secret. And we got to visit there last month, I guess maybe 2 months ago now. By the time this airs, it'll probably be 3 months ago. But with some of our coaching clients with Ministry Boost, we got together a bunch of the people that were in coaching with us, came out, did a tour, got to see all the things we're going to talk about today. And I do have some pictures. So if people are watching this on YouTube now, instead of listening, they can see some of those pictures. If not, they're just going to have to go to YouTube and fast forward or whatever to the point to see those pictures. But we got to experience to see your kids in student area, talk about what you do, how you do it, why you do it that way. And there were definitely some cool things. I thought we got to talk about this on the podcast. But before we do that, give us the big picture of CCV, like church, average attendance, it's multi-site, how many campuses. And again, some people are listening like, I'm in a church of 120. How can I relate? And I would just say a lot of things we're going to talk about, you can totally relate to, just adjusting it to your church. And you've got campuses of different sizes too, but give us the overview.
Yeah, overview. CCV attendance wise, I think we're averaging right now around 43,000. And we have 15 locations. Ultimately, what we say is, we're one church just at different locations. And so, it is an incredible experience to come to CCV. I think our mission, and a motto for CCV is just like every other church. We really want to, there's so many different things there, but I would say you're ultimately reaching the lost. And we do that in a couple different ways. And we definitely try to cater or at least look into one direction as you look at multiple, right? But we want to reach anybody and everybody that's lost, but we also want to make a guy feel comfortable on coming onto each one of our campuses. And ultimately that triggers down to making the female feel welcomed, and then also making the kids feel welcomed. And to say that we're very fortunate to live in a place that the sun shines all the time, and it rarely rains here. So with that, we have a lot of outdoor environment experiences. And so we have a grill almost on every single campus where we're cooking hamburgers and hot dogs. We even have fans that are piping that smell, that smoke out into our parking lot. That way, when a guy or a family gets out of the car, but they're smelling that grill smell. And then the big thing about CCV is culturally, we want you to hang out here. We want we do Saturday and Sunday services, and so it could be a Saturday dinner time or a Sunday breakfast lunchtime. We want you to hang. So community is really important for us in creating an environment where you feel like you can hang here. Not only that, you can invite friends, you can invite family, and instead of going out to eat at some restaurant afterwards, we want you to hang here and we want you to have that experience on each one of our campuses. And so that's the environment that we're going to create. We have a cafe on almost every one of our campuses to help with that. So I'd say that's really huge for us here at CCV. And then the other is what we call CCV groups. It's how do you mentioned just at the start of this is like it doesn't matter what size church you are. And so what we like to say is like, how do you take a big church feel small? And that's really getting people connected in community and building a small group, a neighborhood group, what we call CCV group environment. And that's what we really like to do and help people take their next steps in Jesus of whatever that is.
Yeah, and your focus, I mean, some people might listen and hear, wait a minute, you're focused primarily on reaching men. And that some people might hear that and think, oh, that's not good. You're supposed to reach everybody. But the reality is anybody that's learned marketing or even from a good church was probably learned that if you try to reach everybody, oftentimes you reach nobody. But if you try to reach somebody specific, you usually can. And then you reach, other groups along with them. And you all have decided to try to reach men for the same reasons we've talked about before, right? Because like if you reach the man, you're just statistically higher percentage chance of reaching the whole family versus if you reach mom, you're less likely to reach the whole family because maybe dad doesn't come or something like that. If you reach a kid, what are the chances you also reach their parents? But anyway, anything else you want to say about that approach, that strategy? I mean, in some ways that is the core of your philosophy because that's why you have grills and you have that smell and you have these hangout environments and you have a sports ministry, right? At a lot of your campuses, you play sports on TV after church. I mean, like it really is like clearly designed to reach men who are far from God.
It is. You mentioned a TV. So our outdoor spaces and indoor spaces will have TVs, and most of the time, and I would probably say all the time, we are playing some type of sports on those TVs. There would be some kickback on like, oh, what about commercials that were being played on, sure. Most likely you're going to get some type of beer commercial, alcohol commercial, or whatever it might be. And we're not for that. We're against that. But what we are for is an avenue to be able to reach the guy. And playing sports on the TV is one of those avenues that we're going to try to utilize. And hopefully, as they're coming to church, as they're listening to what we stand for, they're going to understand like we're not for those commercials. We're not for the stuff that is going to be advertised on there, but we are for fun. We are for competitive nature. We are for the sports that are being played on that TV. And like you said, the grill and just having that smell go out there and different things that we do around the campus is the focus a little bit more on a guy statistically because of what you said. But even at that, I would say every ministry that we have is going to look probably more towards the guy, but I would actually say the influencer. And I think that's a good word to use because even if our kid spaces, student spaces, we're going to try to zone in on the influencer. So if you think about in our kids ministry, we separate in just a couple different environments. So we'll start preschool and up. So 3-year-olds, we combine 3-year-olds through first grade all in one area, and it's a backyards. I know we're going to get into what our backyards look like in that, but our content and the things that we put into the room are going to focus more on that older kindergarten to definitely the first grader, and most likely the boy inside that room. And then our second grade through 6th grade, it's the same way. We're going to focus our content to that sixth grader that's in that room. The toys, the games, the things that we have in every room is going to be focused on that avenue. And I understand, like, definitely people can question that, right? But
Sure.
here's what I would say. I have two girls, right? I have a 15-year-old and a 17-year-old. My girls most likely will get along in any environment that they're put in, as long as kind of they have friends inside there. They're good. They're golden. But a boy can have friends inside of an environment, but as soon as a boy kind of loses that connection and loses what content we're put on, he's kind of lost from it. He's bored from it. um, what I like to say is that oldest boy affects his friends around him are the same age. And not only that, he affects the younger boys that are inside that room, because most likely they're looking up to older boys. And then once you lose the boys, right, in the room, then you've lost the girls, because now the boys are just disrupting the whole thing and making the girls' time horrible inside our environment. So, that's kind of why we do that. To focus on that boy route, we do that in the same as student ministry, but we definitely will use the word influencer a lot of that time.
Yeah, yeah. I was actually talking to one of our church plants that we helped plant recently, and they're a church of like 170 or something like that. They don't really have a student ministry because they don't have enough students. But it was funny because the one lady on staff was mentioning how they have like, I don't know, a handful of like four or five ninth grade boys or something, like all in the same grade, and they're all introverts, and they can't, their parents and the families have even tried to get these boys to like connect, to be friends, and they just, with all of being introverts and not having like a student ministry that's large and you can kind of hide in, they've all not connected, which is just really funny. Because part of me does think, again, we're talking stereotypes here, but stereotypes are stereotypes for reasons, because a lot of times it's majority true. If that was four girls that were about the same grade, there's a chance, maybe not guaranteed, but maybe a better chance, that they'd be friends and they'd have like this little student ministry small group, just within those families. But they can't make it work with these boys, which is just so funny. And some people, we are playing into stereotypes. Not all guys like sports.
For sure.
Not all families have a dad at home. You know what I mean? Like, so
Yeah.
there's like not all, obviously, what is the number? Something like a very low percentage of families are husband and wife, first marriage, biological kids. I mean, it's only like 20 some percent of families fit that
So
definition
low
anymore.
now.
So,
Yeah.
so obviously we're playing into some stereotypes of reaching men, but those stats they've held, in the sense that if you can reach dad, you do have a much greater chance of reaching the family. And a lot of churches don't. A lot of churches don't
Yeah.
reach dad. So that's a great strategy.
You said something there. It just kind of caught my attention about the families that don't have dads at home. And I think the church has an amazing opportunity on the people that we recruit as volunteers to help bring father figures into kids' lives. They don't replace fathers, of course, but I think boys and girls need that male figure in their life. And so, as you get older, right, that male figure is going to change a little bit when it comes to the female side of it. So we definitely split gender when it comes to, as a kid gets older and who their volunteer is, it's going to be more gender specific at that. But I think it's very important that all of our ages, infants, when you're holding babies, like, how do we recruit dudes to be inside those rooms to help hold babies, and all the way up, by the way. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
that's very important to us.
So one of the ways that you kind of carry on this theme, I guess, of sports or reaching men or whatever, is you call your volunteers coaches. Like, that's what,
Oh, we
you don't
do.
call them volunteers, you call them coaches. And so tell us about that, and even that even means something to help them
Yeah.
understand what their job is. So tell us about that.
When I was growing up, I played a lot of sports, and if you talk to a lot of kids, you talk to a lot of adults that played sports, coaches making a big impact. And so when we think the word coach, we gave our volunteers that name coach because we basically made it an acronym, and we put words behind it, and we want our coaches to act a certain way. And so the acronym kind of explains that out to them, of how to just be a great coach to a kid. And so when you think about coach acronym, you spell it out. The C stands for connect. And so what we want every coach, every volunteer, right? But every coach to connect with a kid and their family. So it's a drop off time, it's pickup time. We want coaches to connect with parents as they're dropping off or picking up their kid. We want them to be able to connect with the kid with a high five, side hug, just by saying what's up, whatever it is. We want them to connect at that point. The O is for own the circle. We want every coach to own their circle. What that means is during our content time, during our group time, because we're big on small groups in our environments. So we do meet in large group spaces, and we play a lot of large group games and have fun that way. But predominantly, we're going to have small group time throughout our whole experience. And so we want coaches to own their circle. We want them to learn who their kids are inside their group. What did the kid do last week? What's a kid got coming up next week? And so how can we pray for them and just really get to know who they are, what they're about, things that they like. So just owning that time, owning that circle. And then the A is for actively participate. We want every coach to actively participate with the things that are going on inside of each room. And so that could be playing games with the kids. That could be the content that we're putting on the screen, making sure the coach is watching the content because we're putting on a screen, or worship time. When we do worship with motions, we want the coaches to be doing those motions at the same time. The reason why, everything I just mentioned, the reason why is most of the time our kids are looking up to their coach. And so if they see a coach not doing something, whatever it might be, they might not do it either because their coach isn't doing. So we really want to lead by example and say, hey, we want you to actively participate in everything that we do. And then the last is CH. We put those two letters together, and it stands for challenge. We want each coach to challenge themselves in their next step with Jesus, but also challenge a kid in their next step with Jesus. We got different next steps that are very clear for a coach, for a kid, and that could be baptism, that could be serving, that could be coming to church regularly. And then the last one is share their story and invite someone to church. So as a coach, yeah, you have to be baptized. You're already serving, you're coming to church regularly, right? But a coach will always have a next step of sharing their story and inviting someone to church. And the same with a kid, if they've been baptized and serve and come all the time, we want to challenge them to share their story and invite a friend to church. And so, yeah, that's kind of like what we push a lot for our coaches and how we look at our next steps.
Well, I love the clarity around it. That helps the people, like, they know what the job's about. The fact that you're talking about regularly, you have like this excuse because it's built into the acronym to talk about challenging them to invite and share their story. That's huge. You know what I mean? Like, yes. I think of years ago, I asked the church, they were still doing, I think I've mentioned this on the podcast before, but anyway, they were still doing invite cards for series, like when a new series would launch. And I asked the pastor if they thought that was still good. Like, is that effective? And his point was, I don't know, but at least it gives us an excuse to talk about it. So like people know that you're supposed to do this. So like whether you're doing it or not, whether the card's helping you or not, the card is like an excuse just to talk about. So you have this built-in excuse to talk about challenge, inviting people and sharing your story because it's part of the acronym. So that's good.
It's in front of you all the time.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about, so we got to see a bunch of different things there, and certainly one of them caught my attention. I have some pictures we can show. We'll show the backyards, but before we get the backyards, the other thing I want to show is, and let's see if I have this on a picture here.
Well,
so if people are listening, they're probably going to want to go check out YouTube, especially now that all these episodes are going to be on YouTube. I don't know about other people. I've actually started watching some of the podcasts I used to listen to. I'll play on YouTube if I can and watch. But we were in this room and saw these boxes that have labels on them.
Yes.
And then up close, you can't really tell as much in the video, or at least if you're really zoomed in, but they say second time attendance reward, third time attendance reward, fifth time attendance reward, whatever it is. Like, it's getting on my screen. I can't read it well enough to remember the exact numbers, but 10th time attendance reward. Like, you have built a system where you're keeping track of when kids come back a second time, a third time, a fifth time, a 10th time, whatever that is. And you're rewarding that. And you talked about it as kind of like the gamification of retention. So tell us about what that is, how we got to get in the nuts and bolts here. So like, how do you manage it? What is it? What's the purpose of it? How's it going? But give us the overview first. Like, what is this and why do you do it?
Yeah. The real reason, I guess, why you said is the retention aspect. What I know sometimes is the things that are rewarded. That's the things that keep happening. And so, uh, I remember I started going to church when I was in high school, but I remember helping in our elementary Sunday school rooms, right? And on the wall would be kind of a huge poster board with names on it. And every time a kid would show up, they put a sticker next to the week that they were there, and that just got me thinking a couple of years ago. And how can we reward a kid for coming, and not so much like, hey, thanks for coming, here a piece of candy, because we want them to come without that candy, right? But at the end of the day, could it bring or could it create a habit in a kid or a family's because of having the attendance rewards that we do? So we tried something out last year, and that was different milestones throughout the year that we would reward a kid for being here. So what that looks like for last year was like their fifth visit, we'd give them something. Their 10th visit, we'd give them something, and so on. So we did 15, 20, 30, 40, and 45. We know there's more weeks than 45 in a year, but the reason why we stop at 45 is we want families to be families. We want them to take vacations. We don't want them to feel like they have to be here every single weekend. And the reason why I say that is I had parents come up to me and say, "Hey, thanks, we can't go on vacation now because my kid wants to be here to get the very last prize."
Yeah.
And so we made it 45, but different levels. The reward got maybe a little bit better. And so what I noticed from last year from doing this is just the the retention rate, but I would say the drop in the kids' numbers that we had from their first visit to their second visit and so on down the line. But once we got to their 10th visit, that number, that drop, and then our retention rate actually got better. And
Mm.
so I thought, man, how do we create a habit? This is great. The rewards are working out great, but how do we create a habit earlier in the stages? So after their first visit, their second, how do we get them to come back more often? Because I know, looking at this, once they hit around their 10th visit, we don't lose them as much. And
Mm-hmm.
so something that we're trying this year is I put in place, and we have a database here called The Rock. The Rock is incredible, and we were able to adjust a little bit on our printout. So when you check in as a kid, you get 3 stickers. The first sticker is a name sticker that they put on. The second sticker is basically a check-in sticker. So when you walk inside the room, you give that check-in sticker to your coach. And then the third sticker is a parent sticker. But what we did with the reward system is kind of entice them to come back every single week. So that first visit, they got a sticker saying, "Hey, this was your first visit. Congratulations, we're glad you're here. But your next visit, you get you unlock your reward." And
You get a car.
yeah, your car right away. But what's really cool is that fourth sticker that printed out didn't give them a piece of candy, but gave them something to look forward to. And
Yeah.
so now, between the first visit and the 10th visit, they're getting something in hand. That could be a 4 sticker saying that next week they can unlock the reward, or it could be a piece of candy. It depends on what week that you're on. So, yeah, our numbers have shown this is such a small sample size that, we're only in May, but we're retaining around 2% more after each visit now, which is just a crazy number when you add all of our campuses together. So we're seeing some good benefits right now of changing that up and making it more enticing 1 through 10, and then spreading it out after that.
Yeah, and 2% doesn't sound like a lot, but it's like interest, right? It compounds, and you're keeping more. So it's kind of like, I mean, normally any more weeks you'd keep less people. 100% show up the first week. I mean, gosh, a lot of churches only 40% might show up after that first week. You know what I mean? Then you're down to 33, and you know what I mean. So if you're
For
ticking
sure.
up, That's a great thing. And it's great that you can manage it in your system. I have to ask for all the kids ministry people, because like they probably think like I do. Why do you print that other check-in sticker that the kid gives when they come in? Do you use that to then kind of almost check them into the room after they've checked in somewhere else centrally
Are you
first?
talking about the second sticker?
Yeah, yeah. What's the
Yeah.
purpose of that?
It literally is. So in our environments, when you walk into our classroom, we have a folder a binder that every coach carries. Again, when you walk into our large group environment, you could have 20 coaches inside the room. You could have 5 coaches inside the room, but every coach has a binder because that kid's going to go up and that's their small group leader. That's their coach. And they're going to give that second sticker to that coach. And that means, hey, I'm in the room now. I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
And that way, when a parent comes to pick up, the parent is going to give the parent tag. We're going to take the name sticker off the kid, and then we're going to match it with the check-in sticker that they gave at the very beginning. And so that way we have 3 stickers, and everything matches. If a kid walks outside of our environment with their name sticker still on, every staff member, all of our security people, they all know that kid should not be out of the room yet because they've got a
Yeah,
name sticker on. So we're going to take that third sticker, that name sticker, or that first sticker off every time at a pickup. So
gotcha.
it's just a check and balance, just a check and balance thing.
Yeah, it's great. I know some folks, like, your church is large enough too, where they're checking in one place, going into a room in another. And sometimes kids don't make it. They check in like they're going to go, but then they decide they don't want to go and they don't ever make it in the room. So you're
Yeah.
almost, a lot of churches are doing almost a second check in by room to know, okay, who's really here, in case we do have an emergency or something like that, who's actually in the room. That's good. Let's talk backyards, and I'll jump back to some pictures here while we're talking through this. We took, I took some pictures of all the different environments. Speaking of check-in,
Yeah,
um,
there's your check-in right there. You showed a
again,
check-in earlier too.
I did. Again, if people are listening, they can check this out on my YouTube channel. But you have something in your preschool rooms that you call backyards, and it's because you basically make little yards inside the room, but there's multiple. So for people watching, they could see that's not going to help. But I actually took that picture because I wanted to see what was on the back wall there. You know what I mean? But this is probably the best
There's your
picture.
mark right there. Yeah.
Yeah, this is the best picture of it, where it's essentially wooden boxes. Box probably doesn't sound right, like fenced in areas, and a bunch of them in a big open room. So you take a huge open room that's got tall ceiling and it's really large, and then you put in these, I don't know if they're 10 by 10 or 15 by 15, whatever, wooden fenced in things where the fence is about 4 feet high, to make little rooms within a room essentially. So if you're volunteering and I'm in one of these backyards, it could be me and another coach, and maybe we got 8 kids in our backyard, and to them it feels like a room because the fence is 4 feet high. They can't see over it. To us, we could see right to the next backyard right next to us. We could even, if I had to, hand a paper to that leader or whatever. So tell us about that, and what was the reason for that? How do they work?
Yep. Yeah. I think the old adage is probably always true, but if you're a church that has a large group room, you always want individual rooms. And if you're a church of individual classrooms, well, then you've always wanted a large group room, a large group space. So this is kind of the best of both worlds. And so our 3-year-olds through first grade all meet in a large group room. But what we have put in is essentially what you see in the picture right here. If you're looking at it, is backyards. And what that means is it looks like a privacy fence going around each backyard. But it holds 12 people inside there. Now, it can hold more. Our ratio for our 3-year-olds to first grade is 2 coaches per every 12 kids. And so with that, so it's designed to hold 12 kids with the 2 coaches that are inside there. Now, every church is out there. We are the exact same. Those rooms are going to hold 18, 20 because of some weekends it just doesn't line up the way that
Yeah.
we want it to. But that's what they're built for because that's our ratio of where we like to be in. But essentially, it's to have a large group environment, large group feel. So when content's going on, when worship's happening, that's all going to be a large group feel. So they're actually going to come out of that backyard in a large group room and do it all together. But then when it's time for small group, and group time, they're going to go inside the backyards and actually dive into more detailed stuff. They will also get checked into those backyards and checked out of those backyards. So it's really, when you think about it, it's a way to keep organized chaos happening at the same time, but also have that small group feel where you can dive in. And like I said, you can connect, you can own your circle, have time to actively participate, and even have a little bit of time of challenge inside there where you're not having other groups all around you at the same time talking. You are, but those fences being where they're at, it kind of muffles the sound a little bit. So you have a little better conversation.
Yeah, I mean, like in every way, you basically treat it like it's its own room. I mean, the way you check into it, the way the leaders work, the ratios. And you don't do this, I don't think. But again, if we're just being real about how this goes sometimes, some churches you're shutting down rooms, if you don't have enough volunteers. Some churches you are over the capacity that you want, or your ratio is not quite right. This tends to happen more as they get older. Like most churches I know are pretty good about this in a nursery, but once you could have 1 to 4, you might have 1 to 5, or once you have 1 to 6, you might have 1 to 8, But the other thing, and I don't think you do this, but the backyards too, again, if people didn't see the picture, if you only had one volunteer in that one backyard, or if one volunteer had to leave to, I don't know, use the bathroom or take a kid to the bathroom or something like that, it's not the same as if it's a real separate room that nobody else is in. I mean, literally there's adults all around you. Like you can't hide in there. You can't not be seen. So that 2 leaders per room thing is a little more flexible because these backyards are wide open. I mean, you're standing next to another adult, and in the next backyard, you can see everything that's going on in there. So I like the flexibility.
It definitely has a flexibility. What I would say is security is so important. And I think everybody listening would say the exact same thing. Security is like number one. We gotta watch our own church from something happening. But ultimately, we know if something happens at our church, and when I say that, I can even dive into like a specific, like if something happens to a kid because one of our coaches did that to that kid, not only does it hurt our church, but it ultimately hurts the capital C church, and it hurts someone's relationship with Jesus, or multiple people's relationship with Jesus. So when you look at those backyards, we still want to have 2 people inside the backyards, because we want to take, as people are listening to this, they probably can even like know or even heard of this happening, but kids tell stories. And so what we want to take away is any story from being told that didn't happen. I remember my girls when they were super young, they would come running into my room and, "Hey, Daddy, there's a deer in our room. There's a deer in our room," and it's a total story, right? And it's just so made up, but ultimately, it's so true to them. They can't think of anything else because that's what they're thinking of. And so when you think of those backyards, or you think of individual rooms, the security measures so high for us that could it happen that an adult walks outside of one of those backyards? For sure. But we want to ultimately realize that if that were to happen, or when that would happen, we want either that other adult to be standing up. We want all eyes on whatever's going on, because kids tell stories. And with those, like you saw, those fences being so high, if our coaches are sitting down on the floor with a kid, I know we have cameras in a room. We don't want to think anything bad, but something could happen at any place at any time, even with 2 coaches in there. But we want to make sure that we want to be as safe and as secure as possible as that we can be.
Yeah, for sure. And I love that. I mean, just having the cameras, having that where you can see all that, there's just lots of flexibility. And we didn't even talk about it. Well, we did a little bit, but they empty out into essentially your large group space. So that's kind of nice too. They can do large group here, and then it's just like right into these side rooms. Rooms I'm using with air quotes if you're listening.
Yes.
Because they're like rooms within rooms. So that's nice. And I've seen churches that have basically the same design, but they actually are rooms, which is nice. But again, this is less square footage, less expensive, more visible, more open, more flexible. There's like so many benefits to that. I imagine there's gonna be some people who listen and are like, we need to do that. Like as we redesign, we need to do that. So that's really cool.
Definitely check out the backyards. We've fallen in love with them. They're great. And like you said, when you get multiple kids inside of a large group room, it really could feel chaos, especially the younger kids, and just being able to keep everybody together. It's really, really helped. And I think the best words to use is it helps the organized chaos
Yeah,
at the same time.
sure.
So
It organizes the chaos. Well,
yeah,
man, this is great. I love that we could talk and kind of bring our experience to the audience, since everybody didn't get to go on that tour with us that we did with you. And even now visually, show some pictures for anybody who can watch this on YouTube, let them see what that looks like. How can people connect with you, social, email, whatever it is, if they have any questions or just want to follow along?
yeah. You can easily search out Larry Cramer, Cramer Cramer, but you can easily search me out Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. Love to connect in any way that way. But email, you can always do that. Again, it's Larry Cramer at ccb.church. Would love to connect, man. The one thing I'm passionate about is we're all in this together. So we work together to get us farther, faster, and help the capital C church and bring Jesus to everybody.
Awesome. Larry, thanks so much for spending time with us, showing us around while we were out there, and now sharing with the podcast audience too. I appreciate it.
Man, I appreciate having me on. Thank you so much.
I really enjoyed my time at CCV, touring around the campus, talking with Larry, seeing what they're doing in children's ministry. Lots of fun things. I love how they're gamifying children's ministry in some ways. And there's so much they're doing there that I think is great in the preschool rooms, the way they're maximizing that space. If you did watch this on YouTube, you got to see some of those pictures. If you didn't, if you're listening to this, go ahead and check out the YouTube channel, subscribe there. The podcast will show up there every week as well. And maybe if you're like me, you'll end up watching on YouTube when you never thought that would be the case, which I did. Here are 3 action items I thought of coming out of my conversation with Larry. 1, measure your retention. That matters a lot. Measure the retention in your ministry. How many families that are coming for a first time are coming back? And you have to define retention. Does that mean how many come back a second time? Does that mean how many are there 3 months later? Does that mean how many are there a year later? So you have to define that first, but once it's defined, measure it and then see if you can improve on that. Number 2, put in a plan to gamify it, just like Larry talked about. It doesn't have to be exactly what he did, but how can you encourage in other ways, in creative ways, families to come back and kids to come back again at your church? And you might not be able to build out the whole kind of thing that he's doing now, but what's one thing that you can do? There are 2 resources I think about, actually, now that I'm talking about this. One, on my website, you can find the 16 gift ideas for first-time families. That's a resource we put together years ago, but has been really popular. I think it's been downloaded something like 3,000 or 4,000 times. And it's just a PDF of 16 churches and what they give to first-time guests to help, celebrate them, help them, encourage them to come back a second time. Check that out. And then if you really want to invest in retention, check out the new family retention plan at ministryboost.org. That's a full plan we put together to help families go from attending first time, or even actually they haven't even attended yet, they're planning their first visit, to being fully involved in your church. You want a clear plan there, and you want a way to follow up with people at every step so you don't lose them. And the new family retention plan will help you, do 75% of that right out of the box, and then you just tweak it for your setting. And then third, reevaluate your spaces based on that whole backyards concept in preschool that they're doing there. If you're like my church, you're probably not just redoing everything to make backyards and tearing down walls and things like that. But if you are in a large environment room and you'd like to break it down in some ways, or maybe you have a room that could have, smaller pieces to it, but then you could put up these backyard things, consider that. Look at your space, evaluate it. Would the benefits of that we talked about, be worth doing it in your ministry? See if that'd be a fit for you. Well, like I said in the beginning, check out Clearstream at nickblevins.com/text for a church message and texting solutions. Check out my new book at volunteerplaybook.com. Get the free resources that go with it. Buy the Kindle or the print copy and get the audio version for free. And if you could, I'd really appreciate it once you read it, if you'd leave a thoughtful, honest review on Amazon. No fluff needed. Leave a real review, and that would help me a lot. I appreciate that. All right, we're going to be back for another conversation next week. Maybe, like me, you'll start watching on YouTube, but if you want to keep listening on audio, that's great too. Until then, I'll catch you in the next episode of the Family Ministry Podcast.